become familiar with Jack Quinlan? Was it through the radio, or was it because he and his family were neighbors?
More as the family were neighbors. I mean, we lived, let's see, there was one, two, they were three houses down from where we lived.
Tell me about how you first became acquainted with either Mr. Quinlan or the kids.
Well, I think the first time was mainly through my sister, because, you know, she had got, somehow her and Marnie got together as friends, only because they were in, you know, the neighborhood. And they'd grown up for a while until they got a little bit older. Marnie was my sister's best friend. Said, would you like to go to a cover? You know, back then, you know, if you were interested in playing baseball, it was like, well, that's a no-brainer, you know. And, you know, back then, you know, they didn't have the crowds they have now. Nowhere close to what they have now, you know. And a lot of times you'd end up going on Tuesdays, because Tuesdays was Ladies' Day. And there weren't as many fans on Ladies' Day. So, you know, it was like you go into, you go to the north side entrance where the players go in. I don't know if they still go in that gate, but it was the players' gate you would go in, and he'd walk you around, and, you know, you'd go in and he'd plop you down in the box seats, and, you know, he'd go do his on-field interviews and all that kind of stuff. And then he'd come by and say hello and go on upstairs to the booth. And, you know, he pretty much just kind of like left us there. And, you know, and then we'd, you know, walk upstairs after the game, and he would do his 10th inning. And then we'd, you know, leave the game and go on home.
Did you ever get to go in the broadcast booth while he was calling a game?
Not while he was doing the game, but we did when he was doing the 10th inning program. One time, and it was the only time that I know that we did there, but it was his two girls were with us. I think his son, me, and I think maybe my sister, and there might have been one other person. But back then, during the 10th inning, one of the sponsors was McDonald's. And one of the taglines was, you know, he'd go out and talk about McDonald's, and he came up to, hey, kids, where would you like to go for dinner tonight? And all at once, we'd all yell McDonald's. And, you know, here we are making our intro as a commercial for McDonald's.
At what point did you realize just how good and how talented Jack Quinlan was? And you said it started to kind of crystallize when you were in your teens?
Yeah. And, you know, because you know, when you're, you know, much younger than that, you don't really pay attention to it, especially when, you know, you'd go to the games and you wouldn't know that he was, you know, you knew he was up there. But, you know, when you got to go to the games with him, you didn't know, you know, you didn't hear him. You just, you know, knew that that's what his job was. And, you know, back then, you know, the kids were, you know, if you didn't go to the game, well, you just, you know, you usually didn't listen to it a lot. You know, you see movies and stuff where you hear the guy with the transistor radio in his hand and the whole 9 yards about, you know, listening to the game and all that. Nobody actually really did that when I was growing up. You know, you went to the games because you knew who he was, and you knew who, you know, Jack was only because of the, you know, Cubs, especially if you were a North Sider. But, yeah, it was, you know, it just, you didn't know that kind of stuff until you got older and you actually listened to him broadcast the game. You know, how could you not? I mean, he made it so he was talking to you and not to the radio. It was like you knew he wasn't actually talking to you specifically, but that's kind of what it felt like. And he would get as excited as you would listening to whatever was going on, whether it was, somebody's home run or, a great pitching outing or whatever, you felt like you were part of the game.
Here's the 1-2 pitch to Billy Williams. A swing and a long drive, deep to right center. Well hit. Center fielder at the wall. Home run! Home run! Hey!
Do you have any question, any vestige of doubt that Jack Quinlan
Oh, no.
enshrinement in Cooperstown?
No, there shouldn't be any doubt for why he's, he should have been in there a long time ago. Yeah, I have a lot of fond memories of them and the whole family, actually. It was more than just him being a radio announcer. It was, him being the family man and, with his kids and the whole 9 yards. He did have at the time, the term now is man caves. And now, but then, and this was back before there was the big screen TVs and all some people got 8 screens in their house and, but this is back before that. They had the coolest basement I've ever seen, especially if you're a sports fan. I mean, it was everything, everything was made out of something to do with sports. His bar was the front of his bar was lined with baseball bats. His bar stools were 4 bats with a regulation base as the seat. And then he had, more pictures and, boxing gloves from some, boxer and footballs, signed footballs and signed baseballs and jerseys and all sorts of stuff. Football lamps and, they used to, they came out with the phones, the football phones. Oh, he had stuff way before that even came out. Lamps and wall hangings and all sorts of stuff. But it was more than him just being an announcer for the Cubs. It was the whole image of who Jack was. His big thing was he used to do an impression of Donald Duck to all the kids. That was his big thing with the kids, is doing his impression of Donald Duck. And we had been at his house several times and in his house, and he'd been to our house several times. And like I have said before, he was my confirmation sponsor when I got confirmed, and Marilyn was my sister's confirmation sponsor when she got confirmed. So, we had the church tie-in, and then, the deal with my sister and Marnie being best friends, and then me with the baseball things, and my still best possessions that I own are the 2 pictures I got taken, the one with me and Ernie Banks and then the one with me and Willie Mays. Him just not being an announcer, but even though he was the announcer, he still went and did things like that for you, brought me down to the field and placed me in the dugout with Ernie Banks and brought me over to the other side. They were playing the Giants and had me stand there with Willie Mays, and that you can't replace things like that. So it was more than just him being a good announcer, which is what he was, but it was also the way he interacted with his fans, the family, friends. He was the member of the church and the whole 9 yards. And yeah, it's kind of corny nowadays, but it was just the way who Jack was.
Do you remember exactly where you were, what you were doing that Saturday morning when WGN announced that Jack had been killed?
Well, I kind of knew it. Now, I don't want to say I knew it before the radio came out with it, but I was serving mass that morning. And I had to walk by the house to get to the church. And there were a couple cop cars and near the rectory, and was asking, what was going on. And I found out that morning, besides my mother's passing, which had happened the year before, that was probably the roughest, thing I had to go through. Not only just because I got to go to all these games and he used to take me to all these games, but, the fact that he had been my confirmation sponsor, and, the families had been, pretty close together. And, so it shook me for a while.
It was something that for many of us, Pat, don't you agree, was the death of a family member almost?
Well, yeah, exactly. And it was. As much, time as I had spent over at their house as they had spent over at ours, and how close my, the two girls were. So it really hurt.
I'm going to give you an opportunity to pretend that right now you're talking to the Hall of Fame nominating committee for the Baseball Broadcaster of the Year. I want you to look in the camera and tell them what you would like them to know in regard to Jack Quinlan and why you feel he is a long overdue enshrinement in the Hall of Fame. What would you tell him if you could look at him face to face?
Well, I'm not too sure he'd want to repeat some of the stuff I would tell him. I would, his record should speak for himself. The acknowledgement from the rest of the broadcasting world should speak for itself. My comment wouldn't be so much a comment, but would be a question more as, what is wrong with y'all, and why have you taken so long to get to this point? Why is he not in the Hall? Tell me that. And then, if you can come up with a good reason, which I can't figure out what it would be, but tell me why you don't think he should be in the Hall.
All these many decades later, do you still occasionally think about Jack Quinlan?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
In closing, unless I think of something later on and then I'll call you back. In closing, do you have any message for Susie and Marnie? Anything you'd like to tell them, have them know about your years back then? Or
other than I, love their dad, love them. I wish we weren't so far away from each other. They were, all great friends of the family. I miss them. Like I miss a lot of the people from that neighborhood. From, the Quinlans down there, a bunch of other neighbors, and, from that whole family. So I don't know what else to say, but yeah.